want to do a bit of a recap of where we are. Obviously, we're in the book of Ezra. He was the man that oversaw the people coming back to Jerusalem. And if you have a look at the first three people that were in charge of all the people coming back, you see Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah, the two books, are actually one book, but it's been divided into two. And the first 6 chapters deal with Zerubbabel as he takes the people back to Jerusalem. Then we have Ezra from 7 to 10 that deals with the rebuilding and the teaching of the law. And then we've got Nehemiah, as we've dealt with before. We've had a couple of sermons on Nehemiah. So as we have a look at the times of the return, there are two things that really stand out. One is that the people came back to rebuild not only the city, not only the walls, but especially the temple. Reinstitution of sacrifice and worship of God was vitally important. It was so important that people would come back and reinstitute this worship of God in the way that was set out right from the beginning by Moses. And then we had a look at something that is really important is how does the Bible define worship? We looked at worship. What does it mean to be a person who worships God biblically, according to God's word? We understand that it's got to be in spirit and in truth. In spirit, it means God's Spirit with us, indwelling us, so that we can take what we have and give it to God in worship. In truth, we look at His Word. His Word is truth. Where do we find how to worship? It's in God's Word. If we take any step outside of God's Word and think that we can worship God according to how we feel, who we are, and who the people are around us, we start to deviate away from biblical worship. Biblical worship is so important in our everyday lives. If you do not read God's Word on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, that you're in God's Word, how do we know Him? How do we know His character? How do we know who He is and what He desires of us? So we learn how to worship through reading God's Word. But not only that, we had a look at the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles was so important to the people. It had a look at the people leaving the Egyptians and being around in little tabernacles and celebrating the victory of being able to get out of Egypt and then celebrate it together. Feast of Tabernacles. All the feasts were very important, but the Feast of Tabernacles was the 7th feast, and it's really important. So now I want to divert away a bit and give you just 2 things that I want to talk about just briefly, and then I'll come back to it at the end. I wonder if anybody knows, if they've seen this before, if they know what this is or where it is. This is a cathedral, and it's in the city of Cologne. The Cologne Cathedral. The cathedral began to be built in 1248. Can you imagine the plans and the things set out for them to build this incredible cathedral? But it was halted around 1560, unfinished. Attempts to complete the project began again in 1814, but was not properly funded until 1840. The completion of Germany's largest cathedral was celebrated as a national event on the 14th of August, 1880. 632 years after construction began. Can you imagine that building plan? Can you imagine over the many years, the many people that kind of were there doing the building? That's a long time. But dedication to complete a work that was unfinished for so long is testament to the stickability of the men who laid the last stones. The original plans first was lost, but then was recovered, and they found it and completed it according to the original design. I would love to visit this place. I mean, cathedrals are awe-inspiring. I remember taking Keith and Avery through to, is it the church on Ann Street? The wonderful, beautiful church. I mean, that pales into insignificance compared to this. So that's one thing I want you to keep in mind. This beautiful cathedral in Cologne, Germany. So there's another picture of the finished cathedral, just absolutely beautiful. Secondly, I want to go to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah was of royal blood, brought up in an aristocratic home, but God had plans for this man. Isaiah loved the king, and the king at the time was King Uzziah. Isaiah looked at this king and was really infatuated with this king. He loved everything about the king, but you see, the king was about to do something really stupid. He was so infatuated with his own goodness, with his own importance, that he tried to subvert the royal priest and go and make a sacrifice in the Holy of Holies. And as he did that, he was struck down with leprosy. Even the most incredible people around sometimes get filled with their own importance, and then look what happens. God strikes them down. In the 6th century, in the 6th chapter of the book of Isaiah, we read, "In the year of King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple." He describes a scene with the seraphim crying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." What an amazing experience for Isaiah to see this. He gets invited, as it were, into the throne room of God, and he sees these seraphim there flying above the throne. But you see, seeing this, Isaiah knew that he was undone. Seeing this, he knew that he was a sinful person, and he lived amongst sinful people. At that point, one of the seraphim flies down and grabs a coal and comes to Isaiah and touches his mouth. God then asks the question, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" Isaiah then says, "Here I am, send me." Isaiah gets told that the task he will have to do is a tough one. But it didn't matter. God had cleansed him. Now he could go. He knew that he was now capable to do what God had set before him. You might seem strange that I'm referring to an old cathedral and the calling of Isaiah when dealing with Ezra and the return of these people under Zerubbabel. But I will bring it all together at the end. So let's turn in our Bibles to Ezra chapter 4. I've broken it into 4 parts. Verses 1 to 7. We've got the opposition. Obviously there's going to be opposition. The second part is Raham's letter, verses 8 to 16. Third, we've got Artaxerxes' response, 17 to 23. And then I'd like us to consider our response. Our response here in this place today. You see, we cannot consider any scripture in the Old Testament without thinking forward and without thinking of what Christ has done for us. We can look back over many, many years of history, and we can see not only what happened in the Old Testament, but we can see what Christ has done in the New, and not only how that impacts us, but how that all pointed forward to Christ's coming. So would you bow your heads with me as we pray? Father, your word is timeless. Your word is so, so important to each one of us. I pray that you would open our hearts, open our minds, so that your word may speak to us. For Jesus' sake we pray. Amen. So first of all, we see the opposition. The opposition. We all know right now that if you are a believer who takes God at His word, you will encounter opposition. We've seen down through the ages that that's what happens. If somebody stands up for what is right, for what is true, for what is biblical, there's going to be opposition. Moses had opposition firstly from Pharaoh. That was from outside. But then after a while he had opposition from what was inside the camp. Adversaries heard of Judah and Benjamin returning to rebuild, and they wanted to join in. Wait, aren't we supposed to let others partake in the worship of God? Isn't that part of being a believer, that we welcome unbelievers into the church to get them to partake with us of God? Actually, we are not. Stepping back from the passage and looking at the church, it is first of all for believers. We come week in, week out to honor God, to honor His word being proclaimed. We come to have fellowship with each other. Most importantly, we come together to unite as one under the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. It doesn't mean that unbelievers can't be here, but the gathering is first and foremost for believers, saints, those who are saved by Jesus, to be of service to Him. Think about communion for a moment. When we meet, when we take the bread and the wine and we share it with one another, that is for believers. It's for those who have been saved by Jesus. We celebrate the coming together of believers to break the bread and to drink the wine. We who have been saved now belong to Christ, and He says what we must do, not the world. And one of the greatest problems the church has today is that we bought into a model called the seeker-sensitive movement years ago. This movement said that we need to dial things down, that we need to water things down so that others who are out there can come in and they can feel comfortable. They can feel okay when they sit there. They don't have to feel challenged. They don't have to. And that's not the gospel. The gospel is offensive. The gospel says that you have sinned. The gospel says that you need a savior. The world says you can save yourself. The gospel says, no, Jesus is the only way, the way, the truth, and the life. The world says no, with enough therapy, with enough education, with enough feel good, you can save yourself. The gospel is offensive. Christ died for my sin, for your sin. That is offensive. If it doesn't offend you, it doesn't matter. Back to chapter 4. Adversaries wanted to join the Hebrews to build and worship together. That cannot happen. What does light and darkness have in common? We are definitely in the world, but we're not of the world. God has taken us out of the world. He has placed His word in our hearts. He's transformed us by renewing our minds. Light and dark do not mix. So what did the leaders say? Look at verse 3. Verse 3 says, but Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the rest of the heads of the fathers' houses in Israel said to them, you have nothing to do with us in building the house to our God, but we alone will build it to the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, had commanded us. God stirred in Cyrus's heart, and he commissioned the rebuilding of God's people and the temple. No one else was to be involved. Look at verse 4. The people of the land opposed the building from about 540 BC to about 520 approximately. Constant badgering, threats, bribes. They were coming against the people of God all the time. Then in verse 6, during the reign of Ahasuerus, they wrote a letter of accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. You would think that because God had brought these Hebrews back to Judah, back to Jerusalem, things would be okay. It would be all plain sailing. God has now made a way, so now we can relax. We can sit back. We can say, oh Lord, you've done it all. Let's just relax. God never promised that life would be plain sailing. If we hold fast to Him and His word, we will encounter harm and hatred towards us for His name's sake. But you know what? He is with us. He's promised so many times in the Bible that He will be with us, that His Spirit will be in us. Opposition will come. The question is, what will our response be? What will you and I do? Verse 7, we see that the opposition write a letter to King Artaxerxes. What did they say? Well, look at verse 12. The Jews have gone out from us, are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. Rebellious? Wicked? Really? Is that what they think? Will the inhabitants of the land regard the holy worship of God, Yahweh, as rebellious and wicked? Now they wanted to be part of that, but they're calling it rebellious and wicked. This has more to do with the loss of income from the city when the city walls have been rebuilt. And they're all together as a people. Once the city is rebuilt, it will serve as a rallying cry to the rest of the nation, and everybody will come together in worship of God. These people who wrote the letter want to show that they care more about the king than they do about God. Isn't that the sentiment of the world today, of worldly people? What harm is there in same-sex marriage? So what if a lady aborts a child? It doesn't really matter, it's her choice. Her body, her choice. So what if you put yourself before this God? You don't want to be a fanatic, do you? Just be like everybody else. Be true to yourself. Worship God in your own way. Worship the God that's in you. Do what makes you happy. Can you see the real danger here? Look at the records, King, and see what the city is. It's rebellious, it is wicked. Everything is rebuilt. You won't have possession of this territory anymore. Verse 16. There's great danger here, King. Please know that these people under this God cannot be stopped. We've got records and records and records of them going and defeating people. And if they come together as a nation, we are in trouble. So what does the king reply? Verses 17 to 24. He says, stop everything. Verse 21. Make sure that they stop. By all means, use any means possible to stop these people. If that's the case, we need to stop them. Verse 22. And take care not to be slack in this matter. Why should damage grow to the herd of the king? Can you see it's all about this human king? There's no consideration for God and for His purposes. But you see, no real search was made, only that which would support their purposes. That's the only sort of search they made. If they had really searched, if they'd done their homework, they would have seen that the decree of Cyrus was for them to rebuild the city, for them to be rebuilt as a nation, but no real search was made. Doesn't it seem like all hope is lost? Doesn't it seem like these people are coming against God? They come against His people? How many more years did they have to wait? They were in exile for 70 years. For 70 years they could not worship. For 70 years they could not sacrifice. For 70 years they could not come together as a nation and celebrate what they should be celebrating. All of this leads me back to the cathedral and Isaiah's calling. God has always been about the promises He has made to His people. From Adam in the garden to Abraham, from Moses to David, then to the eternal King. It might seem that He has forgotten His people, but it's not in his nature to forget his promises. If we read anywhere in the Old Testament, we see a looking forward to a king, a coming king that is better than any king that has been around for centuries and centuries, since the beginning of time. We hear about a king that is coming, that is going to heal a nation. God won't forget his people. It took about 3,974 years from Adam to Christ for the promised Messiah to come and save his people. Not the way they wanted it. They wanted a person to come in riding on a steed, having myriads of angels with him, to come and take away the Romans, to come and take away any adversary they had. But they had a person coming on a donkey. They had a person coming in humbleness, in great humility, riding on a colt into Jerusalem. Nearly 4,000 years. But you see, Christ came. It has been over 2,000 years from Christ to now. His second coming is still not here. We still wait. We see signs. There seems to be signs all over the place of a possibility of the second coming of Christ. But he is not here. But you see, God is not slow in keeping his promises. God will keep his promises to his people. He desires that all come to faith. Although we know that's not going to happen. It brings me back to Isaiah's calling. The God of creation called Isaiah not to depend on his talent or his status or anything else. He called Isaiah to follow him and be his herald of holiness. He now has called you to be his mouthpiece. In this pagan world we live in this place where we look around and we think, man, we are at the dregs of humanity. We live in a place where right is wrong and wrong is right. What is left for us as believers? What is left for us? We don't understand what's going to happen to us. Sometimes it feels like there's no hope. Just as in Ezra's day, it seems like there was no hope. But God had a plan. And he has a plan for us. And I want you, just for a moment, to turn to John chapter 16. There's always got to be a Christ moment in our preaching. A pointing forward to who Jesus is. And what he's done and what he's going to do. John chapter 16. This is just before his high priestly prayer. In this chapter he talks about the Holy Spirit. He talks about their sorrow. These people had put their whole lives in Jesus' hand. He talks about their sorrow turning to joy. And then from verses 25 down, he talks about himself overcoming the world. But have a look at verse 32. It says, behold, the hour is coming indeed. It is come, when you will be scattered. These are the disciples. Each to his own home. And you will leave me alone. Yet I am not alone, for the Father is with me. I have said these things to you, that in me you will have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. These are Jesus' words to you, to me today, even though they were spoken to the disciples in those days, who were going to be scattered. They all knew that something was coming, but even though Jesus told them time and time and time again, it didn't quite sink in. And us looking back now, we can see what happened. But back then, can you imagine that this man who they spent 3 years with is going to be crucified and they don't want to hear about it? But Jesus says, take heart. Take heart, I am with you. You see, there's incredible things we can learn from this passage. You see, the thing is, he says to them, you will be scattered. Persecution will come. It came to the disciples, and you know what? It's going to come to you. If you take God at His word, if you hold tightly to His word, persecution, like it came with the adversaries in the book of Ezra, it's going to come to you. But God has a plan. He sent Jesus. Secondly, he says, we are not alone. Just as Jesus in that moment was not alone, you and I are not alone. We have the Father, we have the Son, we have the Spirit. The triune God who loves us, who has purchased our salvation, is there for each one of us. And just as Jesus said, I'm going to be alone, but I'm not alone. I've got the Father with me. We today are not alone in persecution, in adversity. Number 3, we have peace in Christ Jesus. Even though the world is at war with us, our souls have peace in Christ. That's the most important peace that we could ever have. Jesus doesn't say, my peace I leave with you as the world gives peace. No, the world cannot give peace. It is constantly at war with who Jesus is. It's constantly at war with the gospel, because the gospel says you need salvation. But you see, Jesus says, my peace I give to you. If your soul is at peace with the Lord, you are at peace. Then fourthly, there's a certainty here. We will have trouble or tribulation, but don't lose hope. Take heart. Be assured that Christ has overcome the world. What does that even mean? What does it mean to overcome the world in my situation? I've got financial difficulties. I've got family difficulties. There are people around me who are trying to sink me. They're trying to do things to me, and I don't know what to do. Jesus says, take heart. Be assured, I have overcome the world. You see, Satan thought that when they killed Jesus, it was over, it was done. But they didn't know that that was the greatest achievement in history. Was them crucifying Christ as the Father would have it. And He rose again. Satan would be defeated for all time. We can be assured that because Christ rose from the dead, that we can have assurance of salvation. That we too will rise from the dead. They can do whatever they can to this body. This body doesn't matter anymore. On Tuesday I was reminded of that. I was here at the school. And I was here at the school, and I was here the whole day with, it was my first day as working as chaplain here. And I was standing the whole day, and I've got lower back issues. I'm usually strong, but if I stand almost in one place for a long time, my lower back just goes. Then there was sports, so I helped the kids out with the sports, and I ran around like a mad thing, and I felt something wasn't right. Then I thought, oh well, maybe I'll go to gym and just stretch it out, and I went too hard and my back just gave in. I was in agony, absolute agony. But you know what, you're tough. You don't want to show anybody. But my family, no. I've been in so much agony. This body's going to give out. Our lives are going to give out. There's no assurance that you will have tomorrow. But there is an assurance of eternity. Place Christ in your hearts. Regardless of the adversary that comes, regardless of what the world throws at you. Just as in Ezra's day, where this king stopped everything. We think, okay, there's no hope, there's no way we can go forward. But God's got a way. He truly has. Even in the worst times, you and Christ are the majority. We can take His word. We can rely on His word. His word is yes and amen. Trust Him. Keep your eyes on Him. Look up. Don't look down. It is so easy for us to look and to see that Hamas has now bombed Israel, that there's a big war that's brewing there. We look at the Ukraine, and we see what's happening there. We look at our own country with a voice that's going to divide a nation. We just see divisive stuff happening all over the world. But Jesus says, don't look there. Look at me. I am the way. I am the truth. That's what Christ says. Keep your eyes on me. Your redemption is nearer than what you think. I don't know what you have in your life today. I don't know what's going on in your life. But I know what's going on in my life. And if it's going on in my life, it's going on in your life. And the people out there think we are crazy to serve a God that seems so antiquated, that seems so far and distant. But He's not. He's given us His Spirit. And His Spirit resides in each one of us. We are the temple of God. Romans 12 is such an important chapter. Paul tells us not to be conformed to the pattern of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do we do that? Through Scripture. When we read Scripture, we look at the promises, we take those promises, we make them ours. Keep your eyes on Christ. Take them off the world. It's not easy. Please tell anybody that it's not easy. When people come to Christ, it's not an easy thing. But you know what? There is no other alternative. Keep your eyes on Christ. He's our only hope. Let's pray together. Oh Lord, there is no one else but you. Lord, I pray that you would take your word, you would seat it deep in our hearts. Lord, that you would change us forever. Help us during these tough times. Give us joy in our hearts as we worship you and you alone. For Jesus' sake we pray.